Prushack, who unfortunately sent his apologies this evening, so you have me in the chair again. Bit of housekeeping to start off with. We have fire exits out the door and turn right. Follow the signs. If anyone needs the loo, we'll have a couple of minutes break between items for comfort, and there's a toilet out the door and to the back of the room on the right. I think everybody in this room knows that fairly well though. We are going out, we've got a number of officers online. Good evening, folks. Thank you for joining us, and apologies for the delay. We're also going out live on YouTube, so welcome to any members of the public watching on YouTube. And to remind that this is a meeting in public, not a public meeting. So please don't, no heckling from the cabinet members at the And unless your papers are on your phones, please refrain from using phones during the meeting. No swearing, that kind of thing. So to start with, item 1 on the agenda, which is Chair's announcements. I just have one announcement, which could have come in here or could come under work schedule, but that we've been discussing, particularly in Vale for a while, we've been discussing recommendation tracking. And this is to confirm really that thanks to officers, scrutiny recommendations are now being sent to Cabinet as a specific item with their Cabinet papers. So, for example, if you look at the Cabinet members' Cabinet papers for February, you'll see supplementary papers. And I think the most useful thing about these is they give updates from all the committees on our recommendations, but they also give kind of officer response. And so it helps us to understand how officers are responding and the kind of advice that cabinets are being given. So thank you to all the officers who've been involved with that. I think that's a really nice development. And so I've mentioned this to committee members earlier, but Candida, thank you very much, has suggested that we add the following to our agenda as a standing item each time. So under updates on previous recommendations from Joint Scrutiny Committee, we'll just have the wording, a standing agenda item, whereby committee will receive any updates emerging from the recommendations made in previous meetings. And that should really help us understand how and why and where and if we're being effective in making recommendations and hopefully helping the processes all right. Lee.
I just wonder whether we should also usefully capture a very simple stat alongside those things. Was there any acceptance of any of the changes put forward? Yes or no? It's never going to be total, probably. So it really boils down to it was just all swept aside, or yes, there were some things that were taken on board.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that can be seen really clearly from officers' recommendations. But I think, yes, we can also, I regularly attend cabinet meetings. That's a standing agenda item. And so, yes, we'll be asking officers just to confirm whether recommendations were specifically taken on or not. And from the officers' reports, we can see the reasoning for that. And also we'll be able to see if cabinet do or don't take officers' recommendations as well, which will be equally interesting. So that's a new development. That's exciting. So I don't have any other announcements particularly. So item 2 on our agenda is apologies and attendance. So Candida, if you could just confirm, please, any apologies?
We've had apologies from Councillor Stefan Gabrishak, and we've also had apologies from Councillor Alexandrian Cantor, and there was no substitutes. Present in the room, we have Councillor Andrew Skinner, Councillor Andy Cook. Apologies, I've got a bit of a foggy brain today, so if I stutter at your name, I've got like a bit of a cold and flu brain. We've got Councillor Judy Roberts, Councillor Joe Robb, and Councillor Ron Batstone, Councillor Catherine Foxall. We've got Councillor Ed Sadler and Councillor Lee Rawlins. And we also have in the room, we have our 4 cabinet members. We've got Sue Cooper, Mark Coleman, Sue Call and Robin Bennett, and we have Mark Stone here, who's our Chief Executive. And we've got other officers as well online, and other officers who'll be present as well for the other agenda items.
Great, thank you ever so much. The next item is our minutes of the last meeting. Please note, committee, that Candida sent a corrected version of the minutes for our agreement. Sent them on Friday and also today by email. So please make sure that you're looking at that latest version. I think it was just some minor amendments to one of the items. Could you remind me which item it was? Garden waste.
Yes, I think, yes, it was the garden waste item. It was just the version was incorrect and it was just some minor typos. But, you know, obviously, so it reads better, it needs to be corrected.
Okay. Thank you. Does anybody have any comments or corrections to make on those minutes from the previous meeting?
Those exceptions.
Could I have a vote, everyone, for accepting those minutes? Yeah. Any abstentions? People who weren't there? I think that's excellent. So I sign them and I won't take them. You went, okay, abstain from Councillor Sadler, who has no idea what we're talking about.
I usually don't anyway, so personally, so.
What were you saying about heckling and we recently checked?
Sorry, I'm not heckling, I can do what I want.
It's not heckling when it's the chair.
Yeah. Item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations from members of the committee of disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests and non-registrable interests, or any conflicts of interest in respect of any of the items on the agenda for tonight's meeting? No. Okay, thank you ever so much. I do not have any urgent business to announce under item 5. Item 6, public participation. We do not have any members of the public registered to speak this evening. So we can go to item 7, which is our work schedule. So a couple of updates on items that members of the committee have previously suggested. Thames Water and Environment Agency, we are now working with officers, and thank you, Mark, for taking this up, on looking at that and really how best to make that a really effective meeting when we do manage to get Thames Water and Environment Agency in the room. So we'll keep working on that and hopefully get them here very soon. Do please contact Stefan if you do have any particular scoping items or scoping ideas for that meeting, because we're still in that process of scoping out how that meeting is going to go. The second item is the Bob ICB, the Integrated Care Board, which following our meeting with them last year, we had asked to look at some more specific items. We had a general chat about their strategy last year and we were interested in particularly in some more specific items. Thank you, Councillor Rawlins, in particular, for your comments on that item. I have, in discussion with Adriana, she suggested that it would be much more appropriate initially for that to go to the Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which is led from Oxfordshire County Council. Our representatives on that committee from Vale are Councillor Paul Barrow and from South, Councillor Catherine Keats-Rohan. Stefan and I have been in touch with both of those councillors. They're very, very receptive, share our concerns and have confirmed that the Integrated Care Board will be on the agenda for the meeting of the 18th of April. That meeting is at 10 AM. So I would really recommend any committee members, if we want to register to speak at that meeting or to watch it or attend, do that in the first instance.
Sorry, what was that date?
The 18th of April at 10 AM.
I'm going to be abroad. Okay.
Another thing that I've said is if we have a kind of collated comments that we'd like to make to the HOSC chair ahead of that meeting, if you want to feed any comments to Stefan and I, will make sure that the chair receives our comments in advance of that. And once we've seen how that meeting goes, then we can look at whether we want to take it further. But certainly in the interest of avoiding mission creep.
Yes, and clearly there's lots of health dimensions, obviously, to that item. It was just really to understand those restraints on spending, you know, apparently on owning and the link into planning and our various funds that we want anyway. So happy that it starts there, but and depending on what the outcome is, I think it might need to come back here or to take a broader view.
And as I said, we're perfectly at liberty to register to speak at that meeting as well. The only other item I have to mention on work schedule is that officers have requested that the transformation item that we've currently got listed for May, could we please move that to July, simply because of team capacity pressures. Are we happy for that to happen? And I'll let officers know tomorrow that we're happy for that to move. Or Candida, you can confirm.
I can do, yes. So it looks like for joint scrutiny in May, it's currently empty, but we can discuss that.
Okay. Okay, right. We will, I'm sure we'll find something.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, we're happy to move that to July then.
Okay.
And that was specifically to allow more time for revised governance structures to be embedded in practice so that we can see how the transformation programme is going. Okay, so to move to our first substantial item of this evening, item 8 is waste vehicle purchasing strategy. I'm really delighted to welcome Councillor Mark Coleman and Councillor Sue Cooper as Cabinet members to introduce this item and answer questions for us. I should say that we're particularly being asked to note the contents of the report and ask questions rather than make any specific recommendations. But I'm sure we will all have plenty of questions and comments. So yes, we are focusing on process and strategy this evening. Thank you ever so much for joining us. I should say online, I think we've got Paul Fielding and Scott Williams, I understand, as well, officers. Thank you for joining us and for your work in putting together this report.
Maxwell as well.
Yeah. And William. Hello, William. Thank you. Okay, to you guys.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So, by way of opening comments, this report is to inform the Joint Scrutiny Committee of the current issues facing the councils in modernising and sustaining the waste and street cleansing operational fleet, and to outline the process that officers will use for the future procurement of new vehicles. The purpose of the report isn't to focus on the specific number of types of vehicles, alternative fuels, or the technology our councils will purchase in future, but to agree the mechanism which officers will use to assess the market and for us to be able to select the best vehicles able to complete the intended job, which are within the budget we have available and which have the lowest carbon emissions. The indicative timelines that are shown in the table in the report is there to illustrate the forward planning process which will take place prior to any purchase, but should an opportunity present itself, such as bringing forward capital expenditure for replacements of vehicles to save revenue costs, buying second-hand or leasing vehicles, then our officers will consider this and present the options as part of the business case process. So I welcome Joint Scrutiny's comments in reviewing the report and the process, and officers, as you say, are available online. We did circulate a hard copy and hopefully help us to model to do some rerouting to make sure that we're optimising the best use. The issue that we have at the moment, and I'm going slightly off piece here, so please forgive me. And if the officers feel that I've said the wrong thing, then I'm sure they'll correct me. They're pretty good at that. The officers work very closely and liaise with other local authorities, so particularly some of those sort of bigger ones that are, I would say, are the forerunners in terms of using non-diesel combustion engine vehicles. Think of St Helens with their hydrogen vehicles. So they're working with them all the time. But what we don't have is any really indicative data for ourselves. And so another example would be with Cambridge, where they use electric vehicles, but significantly they use them in the city, where they've got 140,000 residents, whereas our residents are not. We don't have any big cities that have that sort of density. However, what we're hoping is, we're successful with the study, we'll be able to use our data and exchange it with the other local authorities that we're talking with in order to inform our business models. So I'll shut up and let them ask me some questions, or ask us some questions.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman. Just for the benefit of anybody who is watching online and hasn't seen the note, I'll just read the first line of the text, which is to say, officers have submitted a proposal for the Ministry of Transport funding through Innovate UK's Transport Decarbonisation Demonstrators Fund to carry out an initial trial of around 12 weeks of an electric refuse collection vehicle in partnership with an external logistics optimisation software company and an ERCV manufacturer. So that's really good news to hear that bid's gone in. Excellent. Do committee members have questions on this strategy? Councillor Robb and then Councillor Warner.
I've got two very quick ones. Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Sue. Firstly, so a while ago when we were first discussing the replacement of the, aged, inappropriate diesel vehicles, one of the problems of switching to battery operated vehicles was that we didn't have a suitable site to charge them. So how are we going to overcome that on this trial? Have we got a plan for that?
So I think that we need to think of it in two stages: the trial, which is something that can be done as a part measure, and then there is the future strategy of where we're going to go when we have more vehicles. So recharging one vehicle, we've got one on order already for food waste collection. So we will be able to sustain that for the trial. What we aren't in a position at the moment to do is swap out the whole fleet. So the fleet of 96 vehicles, there's probably about 56 of the large 26-ton waste collection vehicles that you see on the streets. So we would physically be impossible to recharge all of those I'm going to say even over the next couple of years.
Well, we did, if you remember, have a trial of an electric vehicle a couple of years ago. And so there is an electricity supply there, but there's a big difference between charging one or two or three vehicles and charging 90. So.
There's also, sorry, if I may say, that although we're looking at the procurement strategy for buying vehicles, there are other connected programs and strategies. So the waste and street cleansing strategy, which you will have contributed, all of you will have contributed to, hopefully. But also the depot that we currently use is coming to the end of its contract. And so when we are looking at sites for the future depot, these are the sort of factors that we're going to have to be considering, that we are future-proofing.
Okay. And one very quick one.
Yeah.
I didn't see any reference to the, in terms of the procurement, to Oxfordshire Inclusive Economy Partnership Principles, which we've just signed up to.
Yeah.
I'm not aware that there are any collection vehicles manufactured in Oxfordshire. I stand to be corrected, but I'm pretty sure.
You okay if I speak?
Yes, Steve.
There was one company, I believe, that David Beckham was involved with, but I went bust last week. And if I can comment on the procurement process of the council in bids, that was not procurement. So it's within the overall end-to-end process of all procurements. Yeah. So it is embedded by the procurement process. This is relating to the choice to get you up to the point of procurement.
Okay. Yeah.
The procurement process is the next stage.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Nick.
So I had a couple of points. One thing that isn't considered at all, as far as I can see, is the maintenance of the vehicles and having a coherent. In the old days, you might have said, well, it's good to have one brand, one type. There's commonality of maintenance. We've got to admit that that's going to be a tough order because we're fundamentally changing the motive power of these trucks. So by definition, we're not going to have a homogeneous set of truck types, but it is a consideration, I would think, and that in the midst of changing motive power, if we were changing lots of different brands and suppliers as well, that might just end up in a very complicated maintenance story. So I just really wanted to pose that as something we might want to just think about. Reading through the paper, I just thought, yeah, this is all straightforward, really. It's a case of what's the art of the possible. And if we're going down the diesel line, we can potentially support biofuel because it will run in essentially the same type of vehicle. It's not recommended by all brands, I noticed, but I think they're all going to get there pretty fast because they're going to join the dots and realise that they want to have an environmentally friendly product. A lot of people say hydrogen is the future. Nobody's made it work yet in trucks. And as somebody pointed out to me, if you compress an awful lot of hydrogen in a small box, it's great until there's a bad bump, in which case you might be looking at something quite bad. So there are some things to be thought through for that. The Hindenburg wouldn't be a good way to go. the other point was about, and this is more complicated, the depot location has been mentioned. In my understanding, when you're routing vehicles, you can look at a tree if you like. The trunk is the stem mileage out to the locale and back again, and the leaves are the cluster that you go to when you're there. And so the depot location could change the amount of stem that we've got, and the frequency of delivery could change the amount of cluster. So if we were able, let's say, for example, we've got black bins now. If we had, instead of 180 litre black bins, if we had 2 40 litre ones, we could conceivably do a 3-week cycle. And that would allow for one man or one operative putting one bin would obviously give you 3 weeks worth rather than 2 weeks worth, which is a huge gain of productivity. So there are things here that will affect how the vehicles are used, and that might affect things like when does electric.
I'm going to ask you to.
Yeah, the point is, when does electric become possible? So
yes,
I was getting there. Sorry.
Thank you.
Well, I think later this year, from the cabinet work programme, we're supposed to be looking at the location of the new depot. And it is, as you say, key to a lot. And I've been pressing for some time to get some more information on that. Officers have done a lot of work on it, as you will appreciate. But until we've got the depot, actually, it's one of the many changing things in this whole field. We do need somewhere to start from, and to be able to store whatever type of fuel if necessary, or maybe generate some electricity if that's
sure. And flexible storage may be
yes.
important, because we might start off one way and end up another way. So.
Yeah, I might just comment quickly on the use of HVOs. Apparently it's not really recommended because it's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to guarantee where they come from.
I
so
know
they're not necessarily
I noted the sourcing issue, but if we could sort that out within the UK and actually.
And then it's
Sorry,
more
we have got lots of questions.
Yeah,
Sorry.
okay.
So I'm going to go to Councillor Roberts, please.
Yes, I mean, that was my middle question, but I'll go back to it because it's just been mentioned. Going back to the timeline, which is kind of one of the basic parts of the strategy, it's a rolling timeline over 2 years, and yet, well, it certainly seems that way. And yet, clearly, you're going to have major changes during those 2 years. And looking at your chart of how you're going to be running this, I find that difficult to adhere to, because your major changes might come in the middle of this chart. So at what point do you throw out? So I find it very difficult to if this is your strategy, to make it pragmatic, fitting in with all your changes that are coming up as well, because this is running over a very long period of time and your changes are not. So that should I do all my questions, or do you want to answer them one at a time?
Sure, I'll go at each one, because otherwise my brain's quite small and I'm going to forget it. So what we need to separate is our strategy about decision making over which vehicles and what infrastructure we require for the future, and the procurement strategy, the process it takes. So this diagram adds both those two together. So each year we will do an assessment of what vehicles will need replacing. So just recently we replaced 9 vehicles. That's because they were coming to the end of their life. The process here will say what vehicles need replacing, what is the technology that's out there and going to be available over this time period. So, for example, if we were going to use HVO, we would say we do not want to commit ourselves to that route. We then go through the procurement process and deliver the infrastructure for the rollout of the vehicle, which is, and I think it's about 18 months, but yeah, that time frame. In 6 months' time into this one, we start again for the next batch of vehicles and say, do any of the vehicles need replacing? So it isn't that this is a rolling program that's going to take.
Rolling at 6 months, not at 1 year, because the text kind of gives you especially back you start on the January. And it says from 25, 26 through to 28, 29. That kind of implies that you're rolling it out on an annual basis. But you're saying that you would start the procedure for a fleet approval fleet appraisal procurement every 6 months and have those rolling through. Because I can see that, you can get down here as far as finalise the vehicle specification, which if you started in January one year, you end up in January the next year.
Yeah, no, sorry.
The Zippo will have come in September and gone, oh, rubbish, none of those things apply now.
If I said 6 monthly, I didn't mean to say 6 monthly. This is on an annual basis, which will be, because it's got to be reflected to the budget. So we need to put the bid into the budget.
Yeah, I suppose what I'm saying is this is a long-winded process. And yes, you're saying it goes from 6 months appraisal to 18
It goes
months
on and
rollout.
on and on. It's continuous.
I would like to see some intervention points where you can say, if a major change has happened, to reassess at this point, because there are pretty major changes both on technology and software and your depot siting, all of which might make your first 6 months completely unnecessary or completely, not necessarily completely, but certainly throw some spanners in the works for that initial 6 months assessment.
So I understand the point you're making. I'm just not sure that we're able to do that because of the lead-in time it takes to get. So the vehicles that we ordered at the beginning of the year will not be rolled out until I think June or July of this.
Yeah.
6 months later, having ordered them.
I think once you get past the ordering stage, you're kind of committed.
Yeah.
But I would like to see, so I'm criticising your strategy.
Yeah.
I would like to see, after you get to the fight, before you do the procurement exercise, I would like to just have a check that says, are we still at the same point? That's my criticism.
It's my impression it'll be ongoing all the time. I don't think there's a cut off. Well, there is for one, yes, once you've ordered the vehicles. But
Okay. Scott Williamson, would you like to jump in on that?
Yes, if I may, just to say that yes, it is intended to be an annual rolling programme, but it's got gateway points built into it. So one of the biggest gateway points would be pulling together the business case, and that would happen after we'd secured the funding through the capital programme. So it's upon reviewing that business case, we're actually then nailing the colours to the mast, as it were, to say, well, yes, we're buying so many vehicles of this technology, so many vehicles of this technology, and obviously that's incumbent on having the depot in place to be able to charge, for example, having storage for fuel at the depot. So it would all be built in as part of the business case. And in addition to that, things like maintenance, which was a question earlier, that would also be covered off in the business case. So members are reviewing a full picture.
In which case I dislike the text because I think it's misleading.
Okay, so we can come back to our discussion about what we'd like, the comments we'd like to make, and we can ask more clarity on that. Okay.
Can I do my other questions?
Can I go to Councillor Skinner and then Councillor Sadler?
Thank you.
I'll come back to you then.
Chair. I moved into my house in 1987 in what was a new road on the edge of Abingdon. And I think I'd been there for about 2 weeks before a furniture lorry came down and made a 6 foot long by 3 or 4 inches deep groove in the road. And it's still there.
Can I ask you specifically to address something to this report?
These lorries are going to be probably extremely heavy, and they're going to go down the road, all our roads, every day. I think you also need to include some sort of assessment of the roads in what we're doing. It doesn't say it.
No, and I would certainly say that we haven't included an assessment of the roads. I think the limiting factor is the size of the vehicles, 26 tonnes. So the issue we have is, although we would know that we need more weight because of the batteries, what that does is reduce the amount of waste that you can carry in the back. So the limit is still 26 tonnes. The vehicle's not going to get any heavier. That's the point you'll make, I think, isn't it?
I suppose so.
Yeah.
It suggests that. And that's addressed in the overall. This has got to a procurement point rather than the strategic decision to do it has already been made, has it?
Not really sure
well,
what we
we've
mean
got
by.
to have.
Well, now we're now talking about how we buy it.
Yeah, so what we're saying is we've got a statutory requirement to collect refuse.
Right.
How are we going to go about doing that? The vehicles that we've currently got for next year, let's say 5 of them are going to be, beyond their best before date. So we need to replace those 5. What will the vehicles be that are available, and how much money have we got in the budget? And then we could replace them all by diesel. We would not wish to do that. We would say, okay, can we afford electric, battery powered? And then can we, so we would pick the version that gave us the least carbon footprint that will meet the operation requirements and be within the budget, or we adjust the budget. Did that answer your question?
I think I see how you're going to arrive at the answer. I sort of question whether there'll be an answer in a way.
Well, I think it's a bit of a wicked problem, isn't it? Because I personally would want us to be using non-carbon emitting vehicles right now, but I do know that we can't afford to do it now, even if the technology is available to replace the whole fleet. So it has to be looked at, on that ongoing basis. And I think this strategy gives us the advantage that we're able to look at it annually. And if in 2 years' time the situation has changed, which I'm sure it will have done, then we can vary it. And I think also I would say it may be that depending on what the follow-on waste contract is, that we may say, well, actually, leasing something might be the better way of doing it, or buying second-hand. This strategy gives us that ability to have that flexibility, rather than saying we're going to go for everything right now.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Sadler, do you have a question?
Yeah, first of all, I think it's I think it's quite good news that you're getting this electrical one to trial.
Yeah.
But I do recall conversations in the past about how range is the issue really in South Oxfordshire, particularly as it's such a huge, well, I suppose the same in Wales, isn't it?
Yeah.
The geographical distances for electric vehicles are massive. Reading the fuel types bit in this, I was very convinced by the hydrogen fuel technology, I'll be honest with you, because I thought in many ways that it's a bit more future-proof than anything else, because you've got, you can charge them up with electricity, that can be renewable, the pollution levels are low, and you've got good engines with good range and torque and so forth. So I think the fuel cell technology is probably the way to go. But I do understand that we're probably not quite there yet. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So really the technology hasn't yet met to our needs. We don't have anything that will cover the range, even on that with using that type of fuel. Plus, we've got a storage issue. And plus, actually, I don't even know that there's on the market any vehicle that you can literally go out and order today to get delivered in 6 months' time that would meet those requirements. However, the strategy does mean that in a year's time or 2 years' time, we will be factoring in, say, what is the best form of fuel for us? And if it's hydrogen, then that's the way we'll go.
And actually, the other point you just made, I thought was really good about actually you could buy second-hand vehicles, which might just allow you a bit of time to kind of re-strategize, if you will.
The only thing I would say about the buying second-hand at the moment, if we're buying second-hand, we'd be buying second-hand diesel. Which and that possibly not been that particularly well maintained. So I wouldn't guarantee that they were as efficient. Yeah. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't look at it. The answer is we should definitely be looking at what are our options each year.
I do have a question about the priority given to different factors. And if we look at paragraph 15 under vehicle specification, selection and procurement process, it seems to be that the order of strategic steps, and it does say that they're placed in the decision order by which they'd be taken account of, is A, statutory requirement, fair enough, B, budget, C, efficiency, D, carbon footprint. But then when you get down to paragraph 18 and 19, we've got assess the fleet needs. Then we've got assess the vehicle market with including the waste and climate teams. And it's only then that we get to the budgeting and the capital bid and the budget setting. So it seems to be there that the budget and the carbon bit are the opposite way round in those paragraphs. So I'll ask you to clarify that, please.
I think they've all got to be looked at all of the time.
Well, except that it is specifically said in paragraph 15 that they're placed in the decision order by which they'll be taken account. And it is important. Your carbon decisions, if they come before budgeting, that is very different than if your budgeting comes before your carbon decision.
Yeah, but under the paragraphs 17, 18, 19, etc., it doesn't give orders of precedence. I mean, they've just written in that order. It doesn't mean to say you're going to do one before the other. In fact, they'll go on concurrently because they're different.
No, it does give an order. It says at the outset on paragraph 18, and then it said this information would then be used by officers. So it is giving.
Yes.
Well, you've got to know whether you need any vehicles.
So this is the assessment of what vehicles need replacing. That's the first step. So it might have the answer actually none of our vehicles need replacing. We could then decide, do we actually want to get rid of some earlier because we want to reduce the carbon footprint?
Mm-hmm.
But the answer could be, well, actually no vehicle needs replacing. We just carry on with using them until they get to the end of their life.
Sure. But paragraph 19 is saying then they conduct a high level assessment of the vehicle market.
Yeah.
That's. Have we got hydrogen yet? Can we do a hydrogen one
exactly,
yet?
yeah.
And then paragraph 20 says, then we be presenting that information as part of the budget setting.
Yes.
So.
Yes, that's right. So we make an assessment of what is our need.
Yeah.
Determine what might be available to us. Look to try and set the budget to achieve that. Bear in mind we might not be able to go and buy the hydrogen vehicles. And then when we know what budget we've got, we then go out and do the purchase, trying to buy the lowest carbon footprint vehicles we possibly can. I can see what you're saying. So it's really paragraph 15.
15 in that case appears to be
15 is the right order. Is well.
Because carbon is D.
Yeah, it's the last thing we think about. Because what we have to look at is to say, what can we afford? The first thing is we must meet our statutory requirement. We can't stop picking up things.
We need.
Yeah.
I think we need to slightly rewrite it. What it's trying to say is that the value for money assessment is a statutory requirement.
Yes. So,
but I think they do contradict slightly. So we can just clarify the wording if members are happy.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is what we can't do is agree to spend more money than is in the budget.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate all that.
Some humans would be on our back.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Councillor Batstone and then Councillor Cook.
Just some elaboration on why we rejected the leasing option, because it seems on the face of it that leasing would be a better option because it would give us more flexibility about changing vehicles as technology progressed.
We did have a paper on that, and it was a lot more expensive. I think that's the short answer. It might change.
It's more expensive, and it doesn't guarantee you getting the type of vehicle that you want. So on the grounds maintenance, which I know is not the same thing, but the grounds maintenance, we had to change our leasing process because we wanted to have leverage over the companies. So if we go out on a lease that doesn't give us the enough leverage, then the companies will give us the vehicles that they want to give us.
Thanks for that. Yes, yes, I was just looking for clarification there because I agree with you. Actually, I had a quick look at leasing, and it doesn't look to be a good option in practice.
But the strategy doesn't preclude us from looking at leasing on our annual review if we think that's the right way of doing it. Yeah.
But just putting in some context on the hydrogen fuel version, I've had some interest in this because Aircraft are looking in that direction. But for vehicles, I believe there's only about 14 hydrogen stations in the UK. And whilst we're unusually close to to a couple of them, unusually close isn't very close. We'd have to refuel either at Swindon at the M4 or Beaconsfield on the M40. Those are our closest as far as I know.
I think that would be one of the options we would have to look at in terms of the depot. Could we put our own refueling station actually at the depot? Otherwise, you're going to be going even further.
And that's a higher capital cost to
exactly.
Okay, Councillor Roberts and then Councillor Rawlins, if you want to take that question.
Okay, I've still got three. One thing was it tends to refer to vehicles as if they're all the same. And I know that we have street cleaning vehicles and we have environmental collection vehicles, as well as the HGVs that do the waste
They're different
collection.
sizes.
And right at the beginning, it does say about our statutory requirement is to do street cleaning.
Yeah.
I therefore wasn't quite sure whether this whole strategy included the street cleaning and the environment vehicles, or whether it doesn't. And if it does, there's no breakdown I can see within the document as to whether we have a different approach to those, or, you know, where they come into the picture.
The strategy is for the whole fleet. So there's 96 vehicles, of which only 56 are 26 tonnes. So the others are smaller vehicles. So it may be that there's an option then, say, for example, to go to electric for some of those, because they would be, the technology is there, but it isn't there for the HGVs. So although we've predominantly been focusing on our discussion on HGVs, it isn't solely HGV, it's the whole fleet.
Can that be made clearer?
I mean, but one of the big things, big unknowns here is the future of our waste contract. And, you know, we just negotiated the two.
That is in there, that the waste contract
but-
ends in 26, and that's another
Will it be
unknown.
split?
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't decided that yet. So until you know who's going to be operating what, it's a bit difficult.
So it does
to
apply to all of them.
I thought it clarified it in paragraph 4. Paragraph 4 talks about all the vehicles and the range of plants and equipment to deliver. And then talks about the various vehicles that I think you've just mentioned.
Yes, it does. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go to
I suppose, yes, because from the rest of the document, we're talking really about heavy goods vehicles. Some of those vehicles aren't heavy goods.
You're right.
So that was just the same strategy applies.
It does.
That we may be able to. This is really an SOGC point which hasn't come up. The SOGC target is 2025, whereas the bail target for decarbonization is 2030. I just wondered how happy SOGC were with not pushing it as hard as we could to get decarbonisation, or whether they are just as happy to be in with what I suspect is a financial push and have to go with that.
You've just got to be practical on this and say, what can you actually achieve? I mean, to me, a target is something you aim for. If you need to say you'll actually hit it, we would very much like to be carbon neutral tomorrow, but the chance of that happening are zero.
And there are 2 papers that are going through cabinet at the moment that's addressing exactly the point you've just made.
Yeah,
right. And just a very quick one. 12 weeks is not long for this trial, and there are electric buses. I dare say that the amount of battery storage and type of battery in the buses is not the same as the type of battery that will be in this vehicle, but it may be worth just liaising with them to see, because they've been running them now since November, so they have an idea of the number of times they break down, etc., etc. So they do have a bit of background into them.
I'm not a specialist in this field, but what I would say is we are talking to other authorities who are trying to do the same task using electric vehicles or hydrogen vehicles. So yeah.
So they're.
So I think we are. I think we're looking at. We're going to compare apples with apples, I would say.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
last quick point to Councillor Rawlins, and then we'll firm up.
We're asked to look at procurement. I just wanted to bring out one point. There seems to be a sort of working presumption that we will buy the vehicles and that we'll do it through our capex.
You mean South
we as in the councils. And I'm just going to make the point that, you know, depending on what options we choose, that might affect the operating costs of the vehicles. If we choose, let's say, a leading technology which we think is going to be good for the environment but turns out to have operational problems, then there's going to be some argumentation between the councils and the operator as to whether it's misuse of the vehicle that's causing it to break down, or whether we went into a technology that is going to cause it. And all these issues get quite complicated as you change quite fundamentally from one motive power to another. And as I made the point earlier, there's also some maintenance issues. So I don't have a simplistic answer, but I think this is a really complicated area to think through along the way, and to make sure that we don't do anything really dumb.
Well, I think
Which has been
that's
done before.
why it's good news. Well,
Other thing, if I may, you know, this is where it is linked with the waste, the future waste strategy. So that's where we look at them. But at the moment we have, particularly say, for example, the last set of vehicles we bought, we had no option but to buy them because there's no way that we could go into a lease agreement with the current contractor for something that's going to hopefully last a good few years, when the contract runs out in 2 years. Yeah, it's a wicked problem.
Interesting, isn't it?
It is, and it's a really difficult time, and we do appreciate. I think there's a massive shift happening, and we're right at the beginning of it.
Yeah.
And our account, you know, the next 10 years are going to change everything radically. So, no, I think it's really good that we've got a strategy in place. I think we've given Councillor Coleman and Councillor Cooper a good go. Should we just firm up our? I like to get our money's worth.
I do enjoy coming to my.
That's what we come for.
Should we firm up our comments to cabinets? So we've got clarity on the gateway points. I think that was the term that was used. A bit more clarity on the gateway points and how, you know, if there are big changes in a short period of time, how they can be taken into account of quite quickly.
Can I add to that? The discussion that the officer gave us about the business case actually also covered Lee's pollution point. So maybe something about what is going to be assessed when we get to the business case assessment.
Okay.
So these are all the things that will be covered off. And maybe an indication of how frequently that's going to be looked at. But I'm guessing business cases will be annual because the budget's annual. But
Okay, so we're asking for a bit more clarity on gateway points and how business case assessments are going to be reviewed. We're going to ask for, just to ensure, for officers to go back and just ensure that paragraphs 15 and 16 to 20 don't contradict each other in any way. And if things are running consecutively or concurrently, that's clarified.
Yep.
Other comments that?
My only point about think about maintenance. It's not a, you know, the biggest point, but it is an issue. And also depot location and frequency is going to have to be considered in the mix because it will affect the kind of issues that will be the balance between diesel and electric and stuff like that. So
I can promise you, Lee, that our scrutiny discussions are going to be dominated by depots. That's 12 to 18 months.
lots
So,
of fun.
not fun. So, but yes, I think ensuring that maintenance is factored into procurement. Okay.
and on paragraph,
Just
I meant a bit more with the location, because I
Yeah.
mentioned frequency as well, but yeah,
Yeah,
that
okay.
whole vehicle routing issue and
yeah.
size of bins and all that stuff.
I'd just like to confirm about the weight limit. That's something that we've decided on.
Perhaps we can. I think Scott might be able to answer that one. Scott, can you just comment on the 26 ton? Did I say the right thing, or was I just talking?
Yes, you did, Councillor Coleman. In the main, 26 ton is the weight that a normal ICE diesel combustion engine sort of measures. Now I have had sight of some electric vehicles that they're modelling, which are slightly longer, but they're going up to 32 tons. But absolutely, you know, it needs to be taken in context of where these vehicles are able to service and fit down roads. Just to answer the point that you made, the spread of vehicles on the contract at the moment, they're not all the same size. So there's narrow access vehicles, for example. There's smaller vehicles that can service smaller streets. And again, if we were replacing a smaller vehicle, then it would be done with those parameters in place.
I think that can probably be covered off within a general kind of factoring depot location. Vehicle routing is to really take into account all the different factors that are required when deciding what vehicle goes where. Happy?
No, I've noted those down as your comments.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
All right, lovely. So
I just wanted to say about paragraph 4, just to make it slightly clear, because the way it says it is we have all these vehicles in our current contract. It would just and these will be subject to, well, all of these will be subject to this strategy. Just to make it clear, because it says that they're in our current contract. It doesn't say that we're going to be doing it more ones going through.
I can ask the officers just so some of the wording there.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll leave that as an action for you to take away then.
Yeah.
Mark, on that one, rather than a kind of specific
Yeah.
recommendation. Okay, so we have the comment about clarity on gateway points, comment about making sure that the procurement factors don't contradict, maintenance, depot location and vehicle routing to be factored in as part of the assessment of vehicle needs. Lovely. Can I have a proposer and a seconder?
Second it, I'll propose it.
Why would I try Okay, thanks ever so much. Thank you, officers, for everybody who's involved in that. Thank you, Councillor Cooper, Councillor Coleman.
Thank you for your comments in this ever-changing field, and yes, we do have to keep the service up. That's primary aim anyway.
Let's take a 2-minute break if anyone needs to get a drink of water, pop to the loo, anything like that, and we'll have a swap around and resume at 19:40. in the background. Let's get going again. Item 9 on our agenda tonight is Didcot Garden Town update and next steps. And we are joined by responsible cabinet members, Councillor Robin Bennett and Councillor Sue Cool. And I think we also have officers in the room, Jane Bolton, and I'm totally sorry.
Nicola Wire.
Nicola Wire, I'm so sorry, you told me I totally forgot. And Louis hopefully will join us in just a minute. So this is exciting because I think to see some stuff, some infrastructure going in. So it's really exciting to have this report come to Scrutiny. And would you like to introduce it? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to introduce it just because Sue and I have spoken and I've been doing this portfolio for a bit longer. So just to explain some of the history of what you're looking at here. I think I agree it is a very positive story because there have been many strategies relating to Didcot Garden Town, and this is the first real on-the-ground delivery items. There was originally a very, very long Didcot Garden Town delivery plan from 2017, which had well over 50 projects, many of which were not deliverable. So in June 22, we revised the plan to make it much shorter, to assign lead bodies, because not all of the projects are actually SODC projects. You can tell by looking at them which ones are ours or less, but some of them are counties, some of them are Homes England. Didcot Down Council is also involved, and there is a Didcot Garden Town board that meets every couple of months to review the delivery plan. So there's a much tighter sort of management framework now than there used to be, overlooking the whole thing. With regard to the money, you'll see it on the financials for this paper that most of the money appears to be in South. The reason for that, it's not that South has deserved way more money or done a much better job of managing it, but that Homes England's, the funding that originally came from Homes England for the Garden Town project, initially they used to split it by council, but then they just said we'll give all the money to South, and we would then treat the whole Garden Town area across South and Vale as one project, because as I'm sure you all know, the district boundary goes through the middle of Didcot. And the Didcot Garden Town area isn't actually all what we'd historically know as Didcot. Some of it's Harwell. We'll come on to that later. And then in addition to the delivery plan, which you can see where we've got to with the various projects and where funding's already been allocated. And we've got the two in-depth documents, the wayfinding strategy, which is to improve movement on foot and bike. And I'm sure all of you have tried to get around Didcot and sometimes been confused about where you're meant to walk. So I think this wayfinding strategy is really important. One of the features that I'm excited about are the maps that are going to be on the signs, which show the distances, because even as someone that grew up in the area, I'm sometimes not sure, for example, how far it's to walk from the station to Broadway. And I think that will really help to encourage people to get out of their cars. And you'll also have seen there's a wide variety of signage around Didcot that's all different. And part of the idea is even outside the station, there's about 5 different sorts of signs. So the other idea is to just make it more consistent and reduce the clutter. So we're allocating £100,000 give or take to that, and combined with the money that we haven't spent that's already allocated, that does give us enough to do the entire wayfinding strategy, which is exciting. I should note, with the one exception, there is a page in the strategy about street furniture more generally, which isn't included in what we're paying for, but we certainly got our eye on other funding sources to pay for bits of street furniture. A lot of that will be included in the Didcot Central Corridor strategy. And then, even more exciting, the green infrastructure strategy. You'll note the stat in that report that the population of Didcot was 25,792 in 2011 and is estimated to be 62,000 by 2031, which I know at one point it was the fastest growing town in Europe. So, and that existing and new population is going to need a lot of all types of green infrastructure. So it's really important that we have the strategy. And although we're only funding a very small part of it, that is an important first step. I mean, I guess the main question any of us get asked when we talk about Didcot Garden Town is the kind of, where's the garden? And this strategy is the key to making that. Hopefully that will be a question that people will not ask once this strategy has been fully implemented, because it will be obvious. I will, and just to note also that for the strategy, Didcot is sort of chopped into 5 sectors: northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest, and central. And as the report says, it's a unique opportunity to embed green infrastructure into Didcot. So I will stop there. And Sue, did you want to add anything at this point?
Only just to say that obviously the amounts that you're seeing is what the requests are in terms of like £100,000 and stuff. Obviously that's not going to go there. So the point that we're going to look at then is going to be attracting funding from various different sources to be able to boost what we're going to be doing. So, you know, we're not going to get a lot out of that first 100, but that's going to give us that first stepping stone into the bigger project, which is around generating more income from the various different sources that we know we can go to for the other projects that we've got, which is part of the green infrastructure. That's it.
Thank you very much, both of you. Would anybody like to kick us off?
Okay. That was really excellent stuff. There's real detail here, proper networks through Didcot, and properly enabling and putting the garden into Didcot, which I guess was part of the aim. So all of that is really good, and relative to the plans of the past, which seem to be up in the air, this is really on the ground, and I think it's great. I did have a bit of a question around wayfinding. You know, there's lots of stuff in here about accessible, legible, visible, eye-catching, and patterns and coding by area, all of which is great. The one question I've got is around lighting, and maybe where lighting is just impossible because a wayfinding sign is away from power or whatever, whether we couldn't maybe just use some things like reflectors, just cheap and easy, but able to. So if you imagine a dark, dank November evening or afternoon or whatever, then what looked brilliant in May and June might just not look quite as helpful. So if you're walking with a headlamp, or if you're biking or whatever, just even picking up reflectors on the signs is something about a reassurance that you've got something there and that you're on the right path and so forth. And I just think all of that, the more obviously we want to see more and more people using that stuff. We often talk about the fear of crime and all that kind of stuff as well. The more it's used and the more there is a bit of reassurance on the way, I think that all helps to encourage people to use. So that would be my question on that one. I love all the green infrastructure stuff, and I particularly noted the things about the Suds streetscape, trying to bring the trees into the streets and linking up the leisure and the parks and the playing fields and making all that part of life. So that was great. I do have a question about page 37 in due course, but let me pause there for the moment.
I mean, I think it's a good point. I don't know if it was a question or just a point.
It's just a thought and a question as to whether there's anything we can do. It may be that there's separate lighting in some cases.
I think the bigger sign down. I mean, I don't know if Jane or Nicky wants to comment, but I think in the bigger signs will mostly be in areas that are lit by streetlights, I would expect.
Exactly.
So you're right about some of the small finger signs on cycle routes and things. I don't know how they will be, whether they will be lit.
No, it's a good point. We can definitely take away into some sort of further design work.
Sure.
Considered.
Reflectors are cheap, aren't they? And they might just give a bit of reassurance. But, yeah.
So also on street signage, I thought the report was great, and the design of the street signage. If there's a lot of thoughts gone into it, I think it's really good. There's some lovely graphics and maps and so forth, and the rather typical kind of circular thing which tells you distances from that point. It's 20 minutes and so forth. So that's all very good. I was quite pleased to see kilometres being used instead of miles, which I think is great. Hopefully you're going to stick to the metric system.
We have an EU flag as well.
Actually describe things as 600 metres and not use yards, because most of us were schooled in metric system. And also, so on to my questions then, because hopefully kilometres, we're going to go with that, are we? Second, design motifs. I was slightly confused by that, if I'm honest, because there was a kind of uniformity of signage that's being proposed. But these design motifs, if I'm correct, there's an element of consultation with local people, presumably throughout Didcot, to work out which design motif they want. Is that correct? Did I read that correctly?
I think the idea with the design motifs is they signify different neighbourhoods within Didcot. So although the overall design is generic, the top panel with the different patterns will sort of help you know which bit of the town you're in, essentially.
Because I mean, there's that's not cost neutral. So hopefully the residents will be happy with that and not complain that they didn't get the leaves, they got the graphene.
I think they have spoken to residents in the residential parts about that, haven't they?
And what about graffiti as well? Because a lot of the kind of problems with the old sign was faded graffiti, things like that. Does that, what are we doing about that? Because that, or is that just kind of a fact of life?
Well, do you want something?
I'm not sure what you can do about graffiti in fairness, because obviously if it happens, it happens. The idea is that essentially we address it as quickly as we can, because what we don't want to do is allow something to become more permanent than it should be. So that would be my thinking on that one, certainly. But in terms of the materials we use to try and kind of prevent graffiti actually having there, that's obviously something that we'd want to bear in mind, I think.
I think quite a lot of thought has also gone into the long-term stewardship of this. I mean, they will mostly be on land belonging to the councils or to the town council, and we did talk in the Garden Town board about how they would be stewarded long-term, because I mean, you can't stop someone graffitiing on them, but you can make sure someone is paying enough attention to wipe it off again. And that's garden community principles in general are about having assets held by the community and having income so that you can continue to invest in maintenance. So, I mean, without specifying exactly how that will happen, I think that is being thought about.
Yes, I have a particular question on budgets. Paragraph 32 and 34 don't seem to match up as far as the capital budget is concerned. I wonder what the difference was.
I think the answer is that, the
because you put in unallocated
because
the
the unallocated capital fund, we're taking 500 out of it for this.
Oh right, so
that's
it's the bit that you're taking out.
Yeah, we're not. If you look at the bold totals, remaining unallocated balance in total, we're not taking anything out of the revenue fund now, and there's 1,060,000, and we're taking roughly 500,000 out of that, leaving 559075.
Oh right, okay. Thank you for that.
Happy?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you for explaining that one. Councillor Rob.
Yes, thank you. Very quick one about the wayfinding strategy. So the report from David Locke Associates recommends that we do the wayfinding strategy in a single phase rather than incrementally. So will the funds that we've allocated enable us to do it in a single phase, remove all the existing redundant street signage, recycle it, and then replace it with the new stuff?
Yes, it should do. And I know we have, should we mention our indicative timetable, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's very draft, literally off the press today, but yeah.
Well, I'm told that Jane only one. But we may even be able the perhaps optimistic timetable is to get it done by the end of this calendar year, which would be extremely fast. So
Yes.
And we will be recycling the redundant street signage.
Yes.
Great. And very quickly, defibrillators, they recommend that where possible we employ defibrillators. Are we looking into that as well? Is that costed as part of this?
Shall I?
Yeah, do you want to answer it?
I think it's something that would be really useful for us to include in that. I don't think it's a lot of extra work for us to just do some mapping and see where they are and where actually we might direct to from the signage, or need to create, to provide more if there is an identified need. And that's a separate piece of work.
Thanks, Jane. And finally, I probably missed reference to Braille, but I'm assuming Braille will be on the signs. Unless Braille is out of fashion. But
no,
we will have Braille.
Okay, we'll go away and do that as part of our design.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
I have a question about clutter. You mentioned clutter, and there was a particular photo of, I think, the concourse outside the railway station where you've got the big signs, and where the clutter is other people's and we don't have any responsibility or ability to change it. Are we able to work with other people to reduce clutter?
Do you think about Network Rail in particular?
Yeah, well, Network Rail, Milton Park, all kinds of people. I mean, obviously, we will have a shared strategy with Didcot Town Council as part of this. But yeah, is there any kind of way of influencing them to ensure that we're simply not changing one lot of clutter for a different lot of clutter?
I mean, I know that the team works a lot with Milton Park already, and some of the projects you'll see are with Milton Park. And we work with Network Rail, though perhaps have less, we can't control what Network Rail do, but certainly there are relationships, aren't there, to we can't enforce it, but we can try.
Might add something?
Yeah,
sure. We've got really good relationships with them when we're working on our arts projects, and our arts development officer is working closely with them. We're just actually displaying some of our work that we've worked with the NHS Didcot Hospital. Patients in there created some new artwork that's actually currently on display in underpass at the Didcot railway station at the moment. So we've got some quite good links there which we can expand on. Lovely, thank you.
Yeah, a very quick one about the green infrastructure report from Arkwood on page 71 of their report, 146 of our report, is reference to what I think is the most exciting, potentially revolutionary part of the whole report, and there's 2 paragraphs dedicated to it, and that's the potential around Northwest Didcot for major green infrastructure enhancements. And they have a whole lot of pictures of country parks, and I wonder why there wasn't more space given to that particular aspect.
thank you for bringing this up.
Yeah.
But that you'll see at the beginning of the scope of this particular report is there's the Didcot Garden Town Red Line, and then there's the area of influence. This doesn't formally cover the area of influence, so I think that that's almost a phase 2 of this type of plan.
Well, I wonder if that could be something that this committee could request that we take forward. Given what we know about the increase in population to 62,000 by 2031, a huge amount of development, what's likely to be a lot of biodiversity net gain receipts, in particular from the HIF, there is huge potential for quite a radical, revolutionary, new country park like Hainault, West Sussex. I mean, they've got beautiful photos, the Stanmore Country Park. So I'd like that to be the next phase, if possible.
Just noticing that Northwest Didcot bit you're talking about that is in this report is part of the old power station site. So that's kind of in Vale. That's in the Vale quadrant.
Which new ownership presumably as well.
Well, I'm talking more broadly though about the potential for large scale nature park for people and nature.
And I think, as and when the road scheme is built, there are potentially large amounts of biodiversity net gain funds floating around.
And I would be very keen to see those spent as locally as possible.
Yeah, I think it's certainly something we're looking at, isn't it, Jane? But is there a formal plan for a phase 2 at this point?
There's not a formal plan, but we've certainly been discussing once we get some of these projects off the ground and implemented. We want to see some real difference made in Didcot town.
Yeah.
To resolve some of the issues that people say, and just really overdue to get some of those things implemented, which we hope can be done relatively quickly.
I think the largest deficit was in central Didcot in terms of green infrastructure. That was our big.
Yeah. And then we literally just started having conversations about the next phase could be to go wider on the area of influence to do similar piece of work, but perhaps a bit broader.
I think it's a level.
But there's nothing formal enough. I'm not sure in the delivery plan if it goes into that level of depth. It talks about the whole green infrastructure, but we're just trying to contain, I guess, and to manage with the resources that we've got and the funding that we've currently got to get some smaller projects off and in progress.
Yeah, for sure.
Just wanted to maybe note, in case anyone from our side of it, that as well as as Nikki mentioned, the mapping where there is a shortage of green infrastructure, also the map on making space for women and girls, I think is a really great innovation with this, with the green infrastructure document, something that has historically been overlooked, making spaces suitable and not, the correct adjective is, but not too intimidating to use.
Is there an evidence base for that you can access in terms of where
space for girls? It's called Make Space.
Yeah, I know of a campaign. I was just wondering what level of kind of evidence comes behind it, whether they're asking for the evidence or whether they are saying this is where all of these things have worked.
They have the evidence. They've done a great many studies.
Design principles around better use of spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really impressive.
Judy. Yes, well, as you probably realise, it's just taken us so long because some of us started in 2013. Yes, it's taken us a long time, and I have to admit people in this room are the ones who've made it move on, because the first meeting I went to was being chaired by the county council, and it was basically at the end of the meeting, I don't think any decisions or anything was decided. It was just a complete talking shop, which I think a lot of people were quite fed up with. So fantastic to see fabulous progress being made. In terms of the wayfinding, I was a bit disappointed I couldn't see the skate park anyway. I mean, certain members of Didcot community think the skate park's the best thing about Didcot. They may not be the older generation, but it's certainly one of the best skate parks in the area, and I couldn't find it really related any of the wayfinding telling you it is there. I mean, I know it's almost there. The other thing is I'm hoping that we're going to concentrate on the main link that's clearly not visible at the moment, which is when you come out the station, how you get to Orchard complex and also Broadway, but also that the green space that everybody says isn't there is literally just the other side of the railway track, and obviously linking that up and making that more obviously in the boards and the totem boards. One that was slightly worried me is the totem board that was right in the middle of the cycle track by the and I'm assuming we won't be putting in the totem boards in the middle of the cycle tracks because that really would cause trouble. And when you get to lighting Cow Lane, she says quietly, the most grottiest, awful place to walk through. If you're getting off a train as a female at 10 o'clock at night, you really don't want to walk through there, but it's the obvious route to go. It's the quickest route, so you walk through it. Anything that will make Cow Lane.
Well, I'm sure you've read the LC whip, but that also has recommendations about Cow Lane in it. Yes. So a lot could happen to Cow Lane.
Pedestrian and light, but certainly the wayfinding and lighting and everything on that, I would have said Cow Lane has to be top of the list. And when we get to the green infrastructure bit, I kind of wanted, it did sort of mention blue, and it did say when we get to project options further down, so long term, which it does say greater than 10 years, so I was a bit sad about that. Suds, rain gardens, swales on Milton Road Park and Road Network. In the last 6 months, I think I've heard more about the flooding in Didcot than I had done in quite a long time before that. If we could perhaps get, we'll have to do some kind of flood prevention because it was quite serious. So if we can try and get that boosted up the list a bit to slightly quicker than in 10 years' time, because clearly putting in rain gardens and getting that kind of infrastructure is massively helpful for doing the flood prevention, but it's also really pretty and nice to sit next to. So if we can try and emphasise that in any of the housing developments that are coming forward that haven't had their 106s and haven't gone through planning yet. I'm not sure how many of those there are because they're all fairly getting near the end. But yes, I'd love some rain gardens and not the big puddle that you couldn't get through.
I think those would mostly be with the Leeds Flood Authority, which is probably most of that. I mean, we could nudge at the Garden Town Board, we could nudge the Leeds Flood Authority, which is the county council. And if you know the cabinet member for development, you could have a word with them.
Well, yes, I mean, I could with my other hat on. There is a to be determined bit which absolutely.
Don't speak through it though. Your other hat.
But the other thing I thought was really adventurous is the Mowbray Park Robin Way. I really like that. I'd never thought of doing that, but it's an obvious one. There's 3 parts because that's in the older part of Didcot. All of this development, because it's easier to put these kind of things in when you're doing new developments with 106 money, that tends to be the area that a lot of these have been concentrated on. But doing things in Fleet Meadows and all the way around where there's housing has been there for quite some time is a really good idea to make them feel included in the overall package. So I know that the budget isn't going to let you do all of it straight away, but even if people see that being linked up, that will be brilliant. So well done for that. Something I hadn't ever thought of. That's me done.
Well, thank you. I have a question about the rationale between headline and not headline projects, but also to try and put it into a question is how are those decisions made? When do the other short-term projects get decided? How do we keep momentum going? Sue, right at the beginning, you mentioned that there are other sources of big funds, and I was wondering if you could talk a bit about them and how we're going to ensure that the work to secure that money is going on. And this is my ignorance with the overall Didcot Garden Town budget is, for example, is there money for officers to do grant bids for big stuff? That kind of thing. Sorry, that was about 8 questions.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, if Charlotte is here, I'm sure she'll be able to give you chapter and verse on all of that and kind of, break down some things. But my understanding is that we have got the resources in terms of officer time and resource to be able to put together the bids, which is obviously going to be the backbone of how we take these forward. So the projects that we've got in terms of the prioritisation of the projects. To be fair, if I'm honest, being quite new to this, it's something that's been happening rather than being, it's all I've been presented with some projects as they stand. However, I would more than happily defer to Jane to be able to give you some more information on how those are kind of prioritised.
I mean, chapter 5.2.1 of the very depth report does list many funding opportunities, and some of which we already have our hands on, such as the Levelling Up Fund and the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. So we're already funding things out of those, and we do have the councils do have their bid writing team that supports all the departments. So we're doing pretty well. I mean, generally the issue is not so much And you can see in the budget here, we've still got quite a lot of money left. So it's just, I think we'll probably spend it as fast as we have the capacity to spend it, be my prediction. Because we could, if we decide that we can actually do more, we can come back and allocate more funds even from what we have. So the leader wishes to speak.
Councillor Wayne, would you like to hop in on that?
If I can unplug my microphone. Yes, I just wanted to say something about that last question about funding and priorities. First of all, around priorities, that's pretty much the role of the Garden Town Advisory Board, where there are representatives of all the partners. And so we review that project list. And as Councillor Bennett said earlier, one of the things that we did as a change when there was new personnel on the advisory board was look at that unmanageable list and say, let's cut it down. And so it's the role of the advisory board that first of all cut down that list and now reviews it and gives priority to one project over another. So I guess that's the process that goes through. It's the advisory board that leads on that. In terms of looking for funding and putting together bids, a lot of the projects on the list, as you read through them, are feasibility studies. And what a lot of them are about is giving us the information to then go out and get money. The fact that we have this wayfinding strategy meant that when I bumped into an officer from the county last week and was able to talk to him about it, he said, oh yeah, I've got a budget for wayfinding for market towns. So he's now going to go away and look at whether they can fund part of the next phase of the wayfinding. So it's producing reports like this, which even though we don't have funding to implement all of them, it means that we've got a shopping list in our back pocket so that when we come across available funds, we can say, yes, we've got projects that are good to go and have already been researched and they're already in place, ready to go when somebody can come forward with funding. I hope that kind of adds to what was said.
Yes, thank you very much. That's very helpful.
I wasn't sure if you were asking about the green infrastructure plan or the entire delivery plan.
What was specifically about the items that were listed in these reports as kind of short term, but not headline? Because obviously, if we are going to deliver them, they're short term.
Well, the wayfinding strategy, we've funded all of it.
I was going to say, any last questions?
Well, I was just going to say, as an explanation, some of these projects have been highlighted in various planning applications and are therefore part of the 106 package. And the planning application has to be approved before the 106 can be approved, which is the problem with the F1 road, because that's the elephant in the room. So I get it out. Because a lot of the stuff where it says to be determined, that is the public inquiry, because it's in the 106 package.
Right.
And if the planning application goes through, then that will be part of the things that's going to be implemented. And the funding is again part of that package. So, and I think the same is true for the North East, David, North East West Didcot development as well. That there's some 106 packages that are associated with that haven't gone through the system as yet.
Yeah.
One on the MPR3 road.
Thank you. Lee, did you have one?
Couple of quickies. Yeah, on that point about the country park or garden park or whatever it is in the northwest, whether that's something that should be taken account of in the joint local plan, and whether there'll be an opportunity to, if there's evidence of need and all the rest of it, that we could actually earmark away that land and identify it for a purpose in a way that might evidence it and enable it to give it more strength, if you like, to be put to the use that's being suggested, if that's evidence.
Well, no, that land is in Vale. I mean, it's a joint local plan, and this is all part of the Didcot Garden.
Understood, so it might require a change of board because it's.
No, I'm just saying it's already referenced in the draft policies, so I don't think we need to say any more than that at this point.
The other question was on that point on page 37 where we've identified that it's sort of saying, okay, there's 767,000 of revenue funding and 559 of capital funding. Is there any kind of earmarking or sketch plan as to how that might be deployed? I know it might adapt according to what other funds or matching funds or whatever else we have to deal with, but
we do have a plan for some of the capital element, which you will see with regard to the 116 to 120 Broadway, which I think will be looked at by scrutiny in due course.
Okay.
But with regard to revenue, I don't know if we've allocated or not, if we've earmarked it for anything yet, or is this ongoing funding of the team?
Yeah, so we've shown you the commitments in paragraph 32. We've shown you the remaining balances, and we've shown you what's already committed within the delivery plan. And that includes some the staff costs too. The remaining 767 is still yet to be determined, I think, and would need further reports to come forward in due course once we have ideas for what those projects specifically are.
I was just thinking you've probably got a long list of wishes, and therefore whether we could sketch out, because whenever you do this, it will be wrong, of course, but at least there's something then that gives you a sense.
So I think it's important to remember that funding is the chunk of money that was given by Homes England to fund this back in the day, but it's by far from the only source of funding for the Didcot Garden Town project. We've already put quite substantial amounts in from the Shared Prosperity Fund, for example. So it's not like that's the entire budget for this project.
Yeah, just thinking ahead. That's fine.
Okay, I think we're going to move to just firming up our comments and recommendations. Thank you so much, Robin and Sue, for your time and for your explanations. I think it's really great to see some momentum and some things happening on the ground, and I think feeling is like keep going and don't lose that momentum. So in terms of comments from the committee, we have strong endorsement of metric. 21st century, please. Yeah.
Metric or both?
No,
just
metric.
Don't
want to give in to them.
as well.
More seriously, I think, particularly in terms of accessibility, we have got a couple of discussions around the signage, about looking at reflectors and lighting and braille as elements to be factored into design. That's all good. And then we had, Councillor Rob, you might need to help create the same sentence. It was your comment about thinking about large-scale green infrastructure and using biodiversity net gain receipts locally. Is there a specific way that we can make that recommendation?
I would just say that picking up on the points made on it was page 76, wasn't it, of the ARCWOOD report, that we should be looking at or request that cabinet, beg your pardon, page 71 of the ARCWOOD report, request that cabinet members look to as the next stage or the next phase of Didcot Garden Town, look at large scale nature park.
You could reference the area of influence, because that's
okay.
Around.
Okay, large scale.
Referencing the area of influence.
If you want.
Yeah.
Okay, in the area. Yeah, okay. Happy with that, Candy.
Cognizant of the range of funding options that are likely to become available.
Thank you. I think that really goes back to what Councillor Wayne said about having all of these things in our pocket ready to go, scoped out. And should the funding for
given where we are in our local plan time scales, it might be helpful time to start to reflect on that. Excellent potential.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments from the committee in terms of our recommendations or comments for Cabinet's request, Alan?
I think the signage
good
that was
stuff.
clear, it was going to be a single phase, wasn't it? So, yeah,
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
So the one that Judy raised about the rain gardens. Yes, it's just that it's under the list for greater than 10 years away, and we have a serious flooding problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'd just be useful to try and get something like that in.
And for cabinets to liaise with the Oxfordshire County Council as the flood
Oh,
authority.
yes, and also with the advisory board, to try and see if they can get a greater support from the whole advisory board for doing something about it.
Okay, so I've got, given this winter's flooding and our recent experience, to accelerate work towards flood mitigation through, for
increase the
example.
priority behind any flood alleviation methods such as rain gardens.
I would question very quickly, Chair, if this is appropriate now, I don't know, but if it's appropriate to have the fully accessible active travel link route from Didcot North to Whitnam Clumps as long-term outside of the 10-year timeframe. That seems to be something that probably could be more deliverable in the nearer term. It's costing.
I think that's a fair point, because I know it's also in the LC whip that the timeframes, this probably isn't the most accurate source for timeframes for travel projects. To be fair to say, probably the LC whip would be more accurate on that timeframe, and it could come forward a lot sooner.
Okay. So I think then we're asking that this document is consistent with the LC whip, and then where there are possibilities to bring forward particularly active travel infrastructure that we can. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, bearing in mind that all of these things are constantly changing all the time. Lovely. Thank you, everybody. Yeah. Lovely to see that happening on the ground. Thank you ever so much for your time this evening, and for officers as you were for all your work, and good luck. Do we have any other items on the agenda?
That's it.
In that case, I shall call. Oh, I should probably ask if everybody happy with those comments for us to write up and pass to cabinet.
The officers just to mention about the skate park, because it isn't in the wayfinding list.
I don't know.
They try not to make it destination. It's been to a stop while we're in this meeting. It's incredible. There's actually two skate parks. It is. It's a really, and the kids absolutely love it, and they'll go come for miles to go to it. But it's slightly controversial in terms of the elderly population.
Right.
Because they think they're a little bit too enthusiastic.
I think maybe we'll ask officers to just have a look at that, but maybe not. So in that case, I shall call this meeting to be closed. We can stop the live feed. Thank you ever so much, everybody.